Look around. You can find cars like these on AutoTrader, like that car riding your tail. Or if you're tailgating right now, all those cars doubling as kitchens and living rooms are on AutoTrader too. Are you working out and listening to this ad at the same time? Well, multitasking pro, cars like the ones in the gym parking lot are for sale on AutoTrader. New cars, used cars, electric cars, maybe even flying cars. Okay, no flying cars, but as soon as they get invented, they'll be on AutoTrader. Just you wait. AutoTrader.
I sought knowledge away from the game and brought it into the game. And so I'm more than happy to help coaches seek knowledge outside of the game and bring it into their game. Any type of leader takes something from football and bring it into their world. It's just such a beautiful trade. Instead of just accepting coach, I've chosen the identity of truth tackler. That means you're going to go seek the truth and you're going to go live the truth.
Welcome to this episode of Sprint-Based Football, presented by Titan GPS. Founded and based in Texas, Titan GPS is your key to sprint-based football success. Designed specifically for high school football, Titan tracks the metrics that matter, like top speed, explosive acceleration, and even the powerful truck stick, speed times weight, for the ultimate performance insight. Whether it's optimizing practice, spotlighting players with 3D highlights, or giving recruiters verified in-game stats, Titan delivers. And with no minimums to get started, Titan walks you through every step. Message them on X @TitanSensor to learn more. Titan GPS, performance measured, potential unlocked. Hey, I'm really excited for this Sprint-Based Football podcast. I'm speaking today with somebody I've wanted to speak to for a long, long time. It's strange that doing a podcast actually allows me to speak to people who I may never get to speak to otherwise. So this is going to be a great episode with Thad Wells.
Thanks for having me, Tony. Same, man. I've followed you for a long time and I've appreciated you being willing to be different and put those thoughts out there. And I think we're on the same page with that.
Yeah, you're saying things that I just don't see other people say. I was going to tell you a story. There's Brian Kula appeared in a Stack online article with Christian McCaffrey and how they train kind of like a track athlete in the summer. And it sounded like he was just totally immersed in a feed the cats philosophy. When I called Brian to introduce myself, he was like, I don't know who you are. I've never heard of the cats, blah, blah, blah. But it's so cool that he and I evolved to kind of having the same exact ideas, totally separated from each other without knowing of each other. And I think that you and I have evolved not necessarily in a training way, but in a philosophical way of coaching coaches. So tell me about, first of all, your football background.
So to get, where we're going in a timely manner, I'll go straight to, I started at 18 years old, just knew I was going to be a football coach. Telling you before this, it was either I was going to be a chef, I was going to be a professional bass angler, or I was going to be a football coach. We had a good senior season and played quarterback, safety, just had a blast. And I said, this is what I'm going to do. So I decided to be a football coach. I thought I needed to go play college football in order to get a coach. So I just went to a small D3 school just so I could get that on my resume. But I wasn't there for playing. I was there to build. And yes, I was building relationships there and learning, but I was studying everything then. Like I was a terrible student growing up, like C student. I just didn't care, but I would read if it fit my desires. You couldn't tell me what to read, but if I had a passion for something, I'd go read it. And so in college, I started reading books just on football. And, I became members of all the CoachHuey.com. I was trading DVDs. I was doing that whole game, just like your blog took off with your posts. Like there was those few niche blogs that everybody was reading, so I was doing that, as a college student. And just working and reading a lot of stuff and just getting ready. And then college football, like I didn't enjoy it. I tore my labrum. I had a hard time being a quarterback. I was moved to safety and I was like, I'm here to coach. So I'm just going to coach. So I went to find the best high school or just a high school job at like 19 years old. And a coach near where my wife, who we were dating at the time, she was going to Virginia Tech. And so I found a high school local up there that said, yeah, we'll take you. So I transferred to the college that was next to him. I went to college based off of my high school coaching job. And so started coaching, kept reading, kept growing. Just got a couple just like good connections just through going to clinics and this and that, building the resume. Ended up getting a head coaching job at like 26, 27, something like that. And just kept on just studying and learning. And then we won a state title my third year as a head coach. And that is when my real journey began. That 10 years, basically, from the time I said I want to be a head high school coach, which was 18 years old, and started coaching, and then won that state title, was about a 10-year journey. And you hear this all the time in books and everything about this 10 years cycles, 10-year cycle. And it's been happening for me in life. So first 10 years of my adult life was let's win football games. Won a state title. Fortunate to do that at a young age. It was awesome. It was great. There was nothing. It wasn't like I literally was just like, well, that wasn't it. No, that was awesome. And then I started to wake up really fast to saying, man, like there's got to be more to this than just chasing titles. That's when my real journey began. That's when I started studying. And that's how I think, I started to develop a mind similar to yours, because I got tired, not tired of football necessarily, but I got tired of just the same things, just regurgitating over and over. That's when I started studying other things. And I think that's probably how we ended up with a similar mindset.
I remember one of the bits of advice that I give other people is read things that nobody else is reading. And I have a feeling like you've read books that a lot of football coaches have not read.
Well, yeah, I read a quote many years back that said, if we're all looking in the same place, we're all going to get the same answers. And I said, yep. That's right. All I see is the same thing. Everybody's going to run 20 personnel with inside zone, counter power, RPO, blah, 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 4-2-5. I was like, man, like this is getting boring. So I stopped. When we won that state title, I stopped studying a lot of football stuff. And that's when I would read a book a month before then. And then starting in 2017, I read 2 books a week. So I read about 100 books a year for 5 years in a row. So I got to about 500 books. And I would say maybe 5 of those books were like, this is a football book. There was some other sports books in there, and there was some really good sports books, but that was still like less, maybe 10. The rest of these books were business. It was leadership. It was psychology. It was philosophy, a lot of philosophy, a bunch of different religions, science, just Richard Feynman. Like I ended up loving him and like went down the Stoicism path, reading all the Stoics, the great classics, reading. Then I got into somebody named John Boyd, who I talk about all the time now, but a lot of people have never heard of him, but he was a fighter pilot in the Korean War. And then he became like the Sun Tzu of our time. And he never wrote a book, but he would give presentations. And he was actually ostracized from the Air Force, which he served for, because he was like, saying stuff like basically like your bureaucracy. He hated the bureaucracy. And so they were like, no, we don't want you. But the Marines adopted him, his philosophies. And so he would go give these presentations to them. And some of these are on YouTube. And then other people started writing books. So I went really way down the John Boyd path, which was a very, very deep, high level philosophy on conflict, strategy, not like war where it started, but conflict and strategy, and like Miyamoto Musashi, Sun Tzu, all those things, but like more timely for our today. And that's when I got into the feedback loop, iterations, creativity, how that all worked. And yeah, so that journey, there was like no football, and it was fun.
I'm going to have you name 5 books, 5 recommendations for the coaches out there. There's probably millions listening to this podcast right now. So name 5. And as you're naming 5, I'll think of my 5. So we're going to give football coaches who don't read books 10 books that they may want to read.
All right. I'm cheating as we're going through this. I'm looking over here on this screen because I get asked this too many times. And when people ask me, I have a Google Doc that I share, and it has 130 recommendations. So the book that really changed my life, I read it when I was like 22 or something like that. This was what set my foundation, created that family balance mindset. That was John Wooden, A Lifetime of Observations on and Off the Court. That was just a deal. Like I didn't know how big it was at the time, but that was definitely like changed everything. Soon after that, I read 3D Coach, which really gave the philosophy of building the entire athlete, not just the winning game. So then I started building that mindset. Then I would say those are kind of the 2 first, more like sports related books that I would start with. Rhythm of Life by Matthew Kelly was a huge book that summed up a lot of other books I read on pursuing your potential. That's what the entire book was about. Pursuing your potential. Oh man. Now I'm getting to where I got to make decisions and cutting things off. There's a series of rugby books, 2 books that are the best sports books I've ever read in my life, best coaching books. They're nowhere close to like what a football book I've ever read, like including like Bill Walsh's The Winning Edge and all the, these ridiculous books. And they're by, I want to say Greenwood, but it's called Think Rugby and Total Rugby. And they are, I want to get this right because this is like, they're unbelievable books. Jim Greenwood. So those books are incredible, man. And then after that, it gets really tough for me to say.
Maybe I can help. I just read The Power of Full Engagement.
That was the first book that Bronco Mendenhall told me to read. And that was the book that really helped me understand what this is all about. Not from a philosophical, but from a very physical, practical, day-to-day deal. This isn't about time. Our energy is what we need to manage, and then our focus. I go from, a lot of people say, hey, time is our most limited resource. No, not the deal. We all have 24 hours. That's the same. How we manage our time and our focus is ultimately what sets us apart and determines how successful we are. Because ultimately, all we have is the amount of time, energy we're going to invest into a focus, and then we invest that into a strategy and execution of that strategy. You want a better life? You want a better system? Like, you need to basically create a better strategy or have better execution of that strategy. And a lot of coaches are all execution and just copycat strategy. And that's kind of what I think you have brought to the table. And what I hope to too is like, hey, there's some other ways of doing things. You still got to execute it. You're not saying we're just innovative and without execution, but it takes both.
When you look as energy as the currency of performance, whether you're performing athletically or from a coach, I think of the Steve Spurrier quote that says that tired coaches make bad decisions. And I hear that and I'm like, I have seen that happen a million times in my career. Dumb decisions by smart people because of being tired and overdoing everything. My 5 books would probably be Essentialism, which goes right hand in hand with everything you do. Chop Wood, Carry Water, the Steve Jones book, Twin Thieves, Groundedness by Brad Stolberg is really good. And these books really aren't coaching books. These books, like you said, Stu McMillan says he reads a lot of coaching books, but they're really not coaching books. And I agree with that. I don't agree with much about Stu, but I agree with that. And even like The Subtle Art of Not Giving Enough by Mark Manson is just a beautiful book about life strategies and things that, like, it's not, when I was in 5th grade, I read Run to Daylight by, the Vince Lombardi book, so I forever I've been reading books about coaching. The books that really move me now are not about NFL coaches. They're like you're saying, they're books that no NFL coaches are reading.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've hit on, so I just think, again, if we're all looking at the same place, we're going to have the same answer. So I went on this journey of bringing other thoughts into football. And that's the platform that I'm trying to have and help others with is twofold. I want to help coaches of any sport bring ideas into their world. And I want to help others take the ideas from coaching and put it into their world. Instead of everybody getting trapped in their own domain, I think there's a certain amount of time when you're young and when you're getting started that you need to learn the basics, you need to learn the ropes, and you need to do all that. But a certain percentage of even then, maybe you're 80-20 at that point. 80% your profession, your specialty, 20% of new stuff. But at some point that script flips where it's like 80% new stuff, maybe 20% of stuff. But even like, I don't even like reading like the new stuff necessarily because like I don't, it's like going to be trendy. I love the classics. I'm more so reading like old football books by like Newt Rockne or somebody in the archives for free online. Like those are like, oh my goodness, they're saying the same thing that we think is like revolutionary now. They were preaching it back then. So yeah.
I love it. I think one of the things that any success that I've had is partly due to the fact that I've been honest and I've shared mistakes I have made in the past. I'm not afraid to call myself. I read a quote one time that says, don't cringe a little bit about your former self, then you have not evolved. Do you have any cringy things in your past coaching?
The number one thing is I was seeking perfection. So when I was seeking the perfect fit, the perfect opportunity. So I got a head coaching job again at like 26, 27. And the next year, a bigger job opened up closer to home. I think that was the right move because we were 7 hours away. We just had our first baby. So we moved back home and then we won a state title 3 years there. And then I got offered a bigger job. I didn't go looking for it, but I got offered it and I took it. More money, bigger job, more kids, all those things. New state, 2 years there, got an opportunity at another place. Really wasn't looking for all these things, but I was like, oh yeah, that looks better, or that looks like a bigger opportunity. And so I just kept jumping ship thinking like, I'm going to go to a place that's more aligned with who I am. And what I figured out with that is there's no such thing as perfection. You're not going to find a perfect job. You got to find a job that's good enough And then you got to make it closer to perfect. You're still not going to be perfect, but you're going to work on it. And I've struggled with that my entire career of trying to find better. I mean, I don't know if this is cringe or this is just admitting defeat. Then I found it. So I left high school, went to work for Bronco Mendenhall for a year at University of Virginia, the greatest year of coaching of my life in terms of growth and just unbelievable mentorship. And then he resigned. So I thought that was going to be like my journey to college and be in that world. And I put in a year of free work, and then you resign. And so it's like, okay, got to figure this out. And I didn't want to go work for any other coaches because I didn't know anybody else that didn't just trade your life for victory. And that's not what I wanted to do. So I went back to be a head coach in high school. And I traveled the entire Southeast for about a month of just interviewing, looking, just finding. And I found it in East Tennessee, a Christian school that had literally millions of dollars in the backing to just build this ridiculous, like everything you would want. Talent wasn't like you had to build it. It was a new place. And this was like a 20-year thing. I was like, I'm going to go. I'm going to develop. Like, I'm not moving anymore. This is it. I'm all in. Like, I'm not going. And I'm there first year. They'd only won like 2 non-COVID games in the 3 years. They had 4 I was head coach number 4 in year 3 of the program's existence. So we get to playoffs, year 1. We win the first game of playoffs. But it's like, okay, we're going. Year 2, we bump up a division, make it back to playoffs. Year 3, I'm telling admin, I'm like, hey, year 3 is tough. We have nobody in no juniors and seniors in the program for year 3. But our youth programs, that's where we're going to build it. Because I was not going to go recruit, because in Tennessee, you can't recruit high school kids. So I could only talk to kids 7th grade and down, and that's where I was building it. Well, year 3, we don't have a good year. My first losing season ever as a high school football player, as a high school assistant, or a high school head coach, I get let go. And so all this time, the Friday after our last game, all this time I'm doing all the right things, building the resume, traveling, like just climbing. And then I'm not finding perfect. And then I say, hey, there's perfect. That's my fit. I go, I sell out. This is my life. Whether it was God or whether there was somebody said, nope, this ain't your fit. This ain't it. So you never know, And so that's a little bit of cringe, a little bit of admitting defeat. Yeah. But we learn and we move on.
I think failure is a great teacher. Success is probably not. We don't learn enough from our wins. I love your statement about you're trading your life for wins. And in your website, you actually talk about, or maybe it was in the Mendenhall stuff that you sent me, and it talked about the divorce rate of coaches. And you see all the time, I don't know, I love when these coaches after 10 years are totally burned out and they say that they're resigning to spend more time with their family, but really they just go to the golf club. They go golfing instead of coaching. So it's really just this, they built a monster as a coach. I remember my sisters would say something to my dad, who was a head basketball coach all of his life. He wouldn't answer. And they said, Dad, you didn't even answer me. And he said, I got a million things on my mind. And I'll never forget that. I got a million things on my mind. And I'm sure you can relate to that. And how do you preach to coaches that they do not need to sell their life?
Well, I would go to speak at clinics and all these things for, like I said, we want to stay title, and that's when I got to start doing those things. And I would lead off. I would share, like every year, I would go find a new newspaper article of a coach that said he was burnt out and quitting. I'd be like, hey, here's another one. Here's 5 more from last month. Like, this is going to happen to a lot of you guys in this room. But, how many does it sink in, and how many of it, because we have egos, including me. Well, I'm going to say not me. That's not going to be me. And here's to me, this is what it is. We all form an identity, and coaches have a very specific identity. The coaching profession is about long hours, grit, working hard, doing all those things. But then, even when you try to escape it, like you quit coaching, you've already formed this identity of this person that they just go. They're never present. I was talking to somebody the other day saying, my dad's one of the most present people in the world. Like he's just always right there. I used to question it when I was like in college, being like, I've never had a deep conversation with my dad because it's always like, we're just talking about what's going on. But now I'm jealous because he's just there. Like he's right there in the moment at all times. And whenever you're around a person like that, they're mesmerizing. Because they're like glued into you. They're like staring you in your eyes to your soul, and they're just right there. And you can, like you said, and I had the identity for a long time as a coach. So it's hard today to be like, hey, honey, I'm here. Yes, son. Yes, daughter. I'm right here. I hear you. I'm not thinking of the million things I've got on my mind, because I have that. I have the tendency, from a long habits, man, they're habits. And to break them, you have to be so intentional. And that is,
How many kids you got?
I have 5. I have a 10-year-old son, an 8-year-old son, a 6-year-old daughter, a 4-year-old daughter, and a 1-year-old daughter.
That's crazy. When my wife and I had 4, and we were both broke and school teachers and driving a used car and a little house with 1 bathroom and no garage. And my first residence was a trailer. For my first 2 years of coaching, I lived in a trailer. So anyway, the kids change you, or they should change you. And it sounds like 5 kids have had an impact on the way you think.
Absolutely. That my first son came. That was my first year as a head coach. That was when I read 3D Coach. That is when very soon after I read Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Work Week, read Essentialism. I read The One Thing. I went down that was the next path I went down. As one of the first paths I really went down during that time was just efficiency, because I had in my mind, I was like, okay, when you have kids, you need to be like John Wooden, not like, these other coaches you've read about that never saw their wife and kids. So yeah, that I don't know where I'd be if it wasn't literally for the John Wooden book. And that was just serendipity or something that just put that in front of me to read, that literally changed my mindset for when I did have a kid.
Yeah, John Wooden was a quote machine, wasn't he? I love the never mistake activity for achievement.
Yeah.
There was a poem that his dad used to recite, that thank God I'm better than I used to be.
Yep.
I love that poem. And that's fantastic. I wanted to pivot a little bit. Explain your rock top stuff.
Like now, like you're just going to start falling off the side of that cliff, the ridge, the mountain, the peak, the whatever. And so this rock top thought that I'd never heard it, I just tried to come up with a word for it, is the opposite of rock bottom, but they both feel very similar, right? You hit rock bottom, you're like, dude, you don't have hope. That's what it is. Like, I don't have hope of getting out of this. Rock top is, well, I did what I wanted to do, but man, this doesn't feel any different than rock bottom. Like, I'm still lost. And so the way Bronco explained it was like, he was like at base camp. It's like you're scaling Everest. You get to a plateau of some sort, you set up camp and you regroup and you reflect and you think, okay, well, what's next? What's the next path up this mountain? The paths up any mountain are very rarely just straight up. You got to find, there's a bunch of paths that you got to decide upon. Some are harder than others. And some don't take you to the top. Some take you to another peak and another journey and blah, blah, blah. But that rock top is it's a lot of people that midlife crisis, I don't know, those type of things, where it's like they get to success in their career or something. And they're like, we were talking about this earlier. I think a lot of success is like early on, you're going for survival. You're just trying to pay the bills. You're just trying to not get fired. And then you reach a sustainable platform or a sustainable level where it's like, okay, I've made it. I'm here. Then that next level is getting to a point where you are significant, having significance. So it's survival, sustainability, then significance. And then when you hit rock top, you're like, this isn't significant. I need something else. And so hopefully you don't have to go down and jump to another mountain. You can just say, okay, well, now how can I, based off my life so far, how can I make this significant now? How can I pursue this next phase of life? And so, entrepreneurs hit this all the time. They scale their company to $1 million, 10 million, whatever. And then they're like, now I'm bored or whatever, but they haven't found significance with their journey. That's rock top.
When I first saw that, I had not associated rock bottom and rock top. And I love that. When I saw rock top, I thought something that I say in presentations a lot is that if you're going to be a coach, you better kind of embrace Sisyphus. You're going to roll a rock up a mountain top in hell, but you better find some significance.
It matches.
Yeah. And if you ever get to the top, I love this, that it is rocky up there. There's no food. The air's thin. It's cold. You can't live there. Like you got there, but you can't live there.
I love it.
And then I'll throw in one other thing. Hansen talks about sevens, that if every hour you punch onto your phone, your happiness on a scale of 1 to 10, that 93% of the time you punch a 7, that you're reasonably happy, but you're not there. And the two things that I find crazy, 5 weeks ago, I snapped my quad tendon, and that's pretty much a happiness level of like -1, and here's what happens is that we we have a built-in survival thing that we readjust and we learn how to be grateful for the things we have. And at least it wasn't cancer. And I am going to get better. And so if I did a happiness thing right now, here I am in a straight-legged brace for 3 months, I would say 7. Here's the other thing though. You win that state championship, you're at a 10. And then an hour later, you're back at a 7 because you're thinking about how you get back. And so I think it's important that we have that balance. Coaches, Titan GPS is the ultimate tool for football programs, including back-to-back Minnesota State champion Stewartville High School, a leader in sprint-based football. Built specifically for high school football, Titan tracks the metrics that matter: top speed, explosive acceleration, speed repeatability, and the game-changing truck stick. Titan's easy-to-use system delivers actionable insights at a glance, and their exceptional customer service ensures you're supported every step of the way. With built-in leaderboards to fuel competition and unmatched accountability, because the eye in the sky doesn't lie, champions trust Titan GPS, proudly made in the USA. Ready to join the best? Message them on X at Titan Sensor today to get started.
So you just hit, like, I love the fact you brought Sisyphus. I don't know why I haven't thought about Sisyphus with Rock Top, but it matches so perfect because there's 2 things that tie in so well with this. So John Wooden, one of his quotes goes back to the journey is better than the end, in. So meaning like, I'm going to go on vacation, the journey to there is better than the end. And so, most people are just always looking forward to the top. They're looking forward to the championship. And, the whole process of rolling that boulder up a hill, it goes back to something I listened from Nick Saban at one point when I think I read it in his book, a long time ago, one of his books. And when I read it, I was like, oh my God, like what like, this is so, and again, this is a fine line between overboard but he talks about the process. And he said, like, when we won the national title at LSU, like I was on the plane recruiting. I was on the plane doing the next thing. I was like, you're insane, dude. Like, what the heck? But many years later, I said, he fell in love with the process, not the result. He fell in love with his work, which that's what we want to do. Now, there's a lot to life that makes for life other than the work in your career. So you got to remember that. But it's not the result. It's not, and you hear this, it's cliche, I get it, but like, it's not. But until you really soak that in, it is the journey. It is pushing the rock. That is life, because all life has suffering. Entropy will never be erased. Therefore, there's no days go by where you're not going to have trouble and suffering and just failure. And so you've got to, if you don't learn to enjoy that, have fun in life, because it's never going to be good for you, because that's it. And that's the stoicism that we were talking about earlier. That's what that basically gets down to.
Well, for any football coach to throw in the word entropy, we are forever friends. As a former chemistry teacher, for those people that out there that don't know what entropy is, that it's basically the chaos theory. It's the reason why Jurassic Park fell apart. Things do not come together in life. They fall apart in life. And so we almost have to embrace the fact that the things we build will always fall apart. Your home, if you live in your home for 50 years, you'll rebuild it twice, right? And I think that's that push the rock up the hill. And you got to find a way, come to peace with it, or act like this is kind of fun.
Yeah. My wife is so sick of the word entropy, but now she's come around. She uses it now. And like whenever we have kids, like our kids are doing something or something breaks. And now, I do get frustrated. I'm not, I've got a temper, and it can trigger, but I'm like, honey, this is life. This is entropy. And, that's how billions of dollars are made, reversing entropy. That is work. Work is expending energy to reverse entropy. That is what you're doing. No matter what you're doing in life, you can't reverse it. Now, there's a whole nother world out there that, if a football coach has heard of the word entropy, I bet they never studied centropy, which is kind of the opposite of it's kind of like anti-fragile from Nassim Taleb in his book. That's what centropy, really is. And that's like, can you create systems that reverse? So the thought of anti-fragile for those that hadn't read it, out there is basically like you have fragile things. Like when you shake up a soda, some pop, you shake it up. Well, it's bad now. You've ruined it because it's like going to be flat. Well, if you shake up water, it's okay. Like it doesn't get better, it doesn't get worse. But if you shake up like lemon after you mix it, it gets better. So like anti-fragile things or syntropy is like when you put effort into something, it actually works against it. But anyways, coming back down a little bit to the word entropy, that's life. And the mindset to accept that I learned from was stoicism. It was studying, Epictetus and Seneca and Marcus Aurelius and, a lot of Ryan Holiday's work and just understanding that you've got to develop a mindset that, okay, that's what just happened. Now what? It's what Jocko Willink says, good, right? It's like something happened and that gets me in trouble with my wife because she wants me to be sympathetic and say, I love you, I'm sorry. And I say, I love you. Now let's fix it. And but that's a coach. That's, we want to fix things. We don't want to sulk on it. We want to go from problem to solution now.
Yep. I tell my assistants every year, don't bring me problems. That's easy. Bring me solutions. And I think that now we're forcing them to work because we can all see the problems. Tell me about the idea of work expanding to meet the boundaries.
Yep. So again, especially when you're a competitive field. So here's the problem with coaching. So I love complexity. I would liken myself, my mom. I'm not saying I'm good at anything, but it's like a Renaissance way of thinking. Like I just love to study everything. I just love to learn and I like to do a lot of stuff. And I'm competitive and I'm obsessive. And, with coaches, they're all competitive. And with a complex game like football, a complex anything with a lot of strategy, there's never not something you couldn't be working on. You could always be improving something. And so it's the fear of the unknown that gets coaches to be like, well, if I can keep my eyes open, I can work on something. That's literally what it is. And there's never not something you can work on. So ultimately what you have to decide this because it's not going to, like if you go down, especially as you climb the ranks in coaching from high school to college, to bigger high school to college, to NFL, whatever, it gets way harder. But at some point you have to remove yourself from that journey and say, enough is enough. I'm not going to do it that way. The percentage of coaches that have done that they're tiny, very tiny. When a coach comes to me and says, what advice do you have? Like a GA in college or whatever. I say, listen, the number one thing you've got to do is pick your coaching tree. You got to pick the tree you want to be on because there's a tree over here where all they care about is winning. And if that's you, man. You got to decide. And then there's a little bitty tree over here of guys that are like, I want to win. This is Bronco 101. I want to win and I want to be an amazing husband and father. And I want to go surfing. And I want to ride horses. And I want to go fly fishing. He wanted it all. And so, okay, if that's what you want now, and a lot of people right now, there's coaches are going to listen to this and anything I put out and be like, yo, okay, that's not, it's not possible. It's not, okay. Well, you don't understand leverage. You don't understand exponential return for an investment. So if work's going to expand it's going to, period. If you're in a field where like the game of football, the game itself has a clock that says you're done. So we only have X amount of time. But the outside of the game, the rest of the week, there's no clock except for the fact that you will die if you don't sleep. And that's where everybody pushes it. So we have to say, if we don't want to live like that, then we've got to set our hours. We literally have to pull out our calendar and we have to say, I am willing in my career, my coaching, whatever, my business, I'm going to put this many hours in. And where so many coaches, business leaders, everybody miss out on this, that's not a detriment. What it does is it forces you to get specific. It creates boundaries. If you don't have boundaries, you don't have rules, you don't have parameters to work within, you're going everywhere. Once you create parameters, now you get to define exactly what you're going to do, when you're going to do it. You become efficient and you become more creative because it forces you to say, well, everybody else is doing this in 14 hours. I got to do this in 8 hours. What do I have to do? Then you start creating systems and processes and new ways of doing things, but you're not going to do it until it's so hard, especially when you're in survival mode. You get that first head coaching job, and if you lose, you might be done. And so you're afraid, but you just sell out versus saying, no, there's other ways. And it's not just about balance with your family and all that. That way also leads to more success as well.
Mm-hmm. The opposite of that, I have a clip that I show football coaches of Herm Edwards that got like 10 million likes online or something. Herm, anyway, I won't say anything bad about Herm, but he had a quote where he goes, coaches just don't sleep at night. We have a notebook by our bed. and we just don't sleep there because there's always something. There's always something. And coaches everywhere glorified that. It's like, yes, that's our religion right there. And it's so opposite for you to talk about Bronco Mendenhall going fly fishing and how scheduled events, I love this, scheduled events are better than unscheduled events because unscheduled events probably won't happen. So as a coach, you have to have a purpose, even during the season, of having reading time maybe, or fly fishing time, or go out with the family and be present time. And I just don't see coaches doing that. Instead, they apologize to their wife and family as they enter their 6-month or 9-month season or whatever, saying that I'm not going to be myself for a while. In other words,
and then they follow up by saying, my wife, man, she makes so many sacrifices for us. And as soon as I hear that, I'm like, oh, bro, it's a partnership, man. You can't make sacrifice. She can't be the only one doing it.
Coaches more than any other coach. I mean, there's 50 sports out there, and football coaches talk about God, family, country more than anybody else because they are the biggest abusers of. I really believe that is that
you're 100% right.
They are like the worst family people in the world, but they talk about family more than anyone. And it's like, if you love your wife, you don't have to tell everybody you love your wife. It's like it shows just what you do. But it really bothers me because like two of my mom's brothers were football coaches, my dad, and, I've seen it. And I don't know how you last 44 years like I did without having some boundaries and scheduling events and understanding how psychotic, even people with good intentions, I can become psychotic about, how much I put into my sport.
Yeah. It's, we had on our shirt, the head coaching job, when we won a state title, our shirt said, family, forget about me, I love you. It had it on it. And a couple spots I went to, that was my main word. And then I started seeing it everywhere. And I was like, man, for one, I'm a rebel at heart. I can't do what everybody else is doing, so I can't use this anymore. But like, what's so unbelievably the paradox in this, or just the unbelievable two-sidedness is coaches talk family, like you said. And then they said, it's basically like, hey, family's the most important thing in the world, but don't pay attention to me when you look at how I treat my family. I want you to be good men, to raise up and be, servants and help others and be family driven, be there. Just don't watch what I do, because I'm not going to be there for my kids. I don't go down this path. I try to be careful on how hard I push this, because, if you want to help people in coaching, like, it's, you're obviously going to turn a lot off, and we all have a lot of stuff out there, but it's just plainly like, if anybody takes 30 minutes to take a walk and think about this stuff, and to just lose your ego for a moment and say, when I'm on my deathbed, am I going to have any regrets on how I'm currently living? You've got to stop and do that. But if you honestly do that and you're way off out of balance, you've got to be like, wow, like, I'm going to regret a lot of what I'm doing right now. And then you can't just go back to work, which is what it's like. They regret it for a few minutes, and it's like, let's just block that out. Instead of just being like, no, because so basically it's like, I'm going to forget the regrets I'm going to have so that I can keep my job and win some games. But what's that worth if you keep your job and win some games, if you're going to regret most of your life at some point? And now you can keep playing games and tell yourself it's okay. I think a lot of people, this isn't a coach thing. This is a lot of egotistical men, which we all are. But again, it's just like, you tell yourself, and you believe it, and you just say, nope, this is the only way to do it. You can't be successful if you don't work 16 hours a day. It's not possible. And I was telling you before we got on here, I like to work. I love work. That's not what it is. It's integrating everything that matters. I don't like buckets. I don't like to say my career's here, my family's here, my faith is here, my fitness is here. No, they're all together. And I get it. It's hard to like run a practice, and cook dinner at the same time. You can't do all those things at the same time. But if you don't have some kind of thought that you're going to eventually regret your life. And the book, The 5 Regrets of the Dying, that's what really brought my attention to it a long time ago, which basically the number one regret of people on their deathbed was, regretting the time they invested into their careers and not living life.
I think I'm trying to picture what, I call them like Neanderthals and stuff in a loving way, the football coaches that just kind of, chew on nails, and they think they kind of think that people like me and you are kind of like woke and like soft and somehow do not put as much emphasis on success and winning as they do. And I love my favorite quote from Essentialism was that we need to practice the disciplined pursuit of less. The fact that McKeon put in that word discipline into a pursuit of less, I think describes what we're talking about. And I'd say often that I would not be preaching this if it did not win, that we are still all about winning, but we are going to win with extremes, not extreme hours, but extreme focus and extreme efficiency. And I say often that moderate exercise never creates extreme results. Well, there's nothing about what you preach and what I preach that is not geared towards winning. And I would even argue it is extreme, but just not in a volume type of way.
Yeah. So the way I think about this is whenever somebody challenges it with an ego of any kind or in a way that's like, you're soft or anything like that. I'm like, actually, I'm playing a way harder game, dude. Like if I want to just win, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll go to a place that has the best talent in the country. Okay. That's what I'll do. I'll go to a place that has ridiculous talent. I will work 16 hours a day. Like winning without parameters and I'll illegally recruit. That's the other one. Like I'll just go if I want to win. Winning without parameters is not hard, right? Go get it. If you can get a job in a place with talent and you're willing to, and you have no parameters, just go bring the kids in. You're going to win. Every new parameter you add makes the game harder, but it also makes it more rewarding in the end. So I can play an easy game and win it because I know how to win that game, but I choose to play a more difficult game, which involves having more components juggled in this pursuit. And it makes it harder. It is a harder way. Like it's harder in different ways. It's not harder in terms of like the hours put into grinding and like trying to stay awake. It's harder mentally to balance all the moving pieces and to mesh it and to integrate it. It's no less of a challenge. And more so to me, it's a harder challenge. It's just we're playing a different game.
To get specific with that, I remember I asked my dad one time, how come he doesn't practice 4 hours instead of 2? And he said, because 4 hours would have a negative effect on my team, whereas 2 hours has a positive effect. So working double does not necessarily create double results. Can you talk to, I just remember a conversation. I was at a school in Tennessee where we practiced 3.5 hours a night and we had success. A new guy came in, they practiced 2 hours a night and we had success. But there was a near mutiny of the staff when we only got to practice 2 hours. But he said that practicing 2 hours is harder than practicing 3.5. Explain how that could be true.
Yeah, I mean, it's harder mentally. Here's what you get hired to do as a coach. You get hired to make decisions. Your judgment is what people are hiring. So ultimately, like it's easier to just decide to do it all because you're not making any decisions. You're just going to say, I think you lack courage because you're not willing to make hard choices. You're not willing to say, this is what I stand for. This is what I'm going to live for. This is how I'm going to do things. And now because I've made that decision to have the hard deadlines, I've got to make real decisions in life. What's going to get cut? People don't want to put in the mental effort because now you're going to have to do the research. You're going to have to go do studying from other people. And you're going to have to ultimately, because no matter how much you get from somebody else, no matter how much they come to Tony Holler to learn speed, to go to somebody else to learn whatever, nobody's going to give you the perfect answer for your situation. So ultimately, at the end of the day, you have to make a decision. My framework that I kind of got from John Boyd and some other different frameworks, feedback loops, is the 4D game plan. Discover, discern, decide, and do. So in life, you got to discover. This is when we're younger, and every day we're still doing this, but we're soaking in information. But if all you do is taking information, that's not going to help you in life. Then you got to discern. You got to take that information and say, what's useful for me? How can this make my life better? But then ultimately, you got to decide and do it. What a lot of people are doing, they're just not deciding what their values are in life. They're not deciding that they're going to invest their life into things outside of their career. And then if they decide to do that, then they got to make decisions where it's like, well, I really feel like I need to lift and get all these lifts in. I feel like I also have to do speed training. I feel like I also have to condition. I feel like I also have to install this play for an hour on the whiteboard. I feel like I also have to do mental training for an hour, which, they don't even do 1 minute of, but like, what I'm saying? Like, it's basically like, you won't make a decision. So in order to do this, live this way, you have to decide, number one, to set the boundaries. And then number two, you got to say, okay, I'm cutting this. And I just think two things happen. They won't put in the effort and time to discover and discern what's important. And then they don't have the courage to cut what they fear might cause them to lose their job.
That job security thing goes right into the thing I was thinking of. I often say that the guy that practiced 2 hours, he almost lost his job, even though he only lost 2 games that year, because they gave him Thursdays off. He said, everything we can do on Thursday, we could do pregame on Friday. And so he went to play golf. Can you imagine what parents in Tennessee would say if a coach gave Thursdays off and he was seen playing golf? But that made him a better coach. And there are coaches that say, I would love to, do the feed the cats, sprint-based football thing. But you know what? First game we lose, I'm going to get fired because we're not working hard enough. And I said, so if you went 7-2 and people thought you didn't work hard enough, you might get fired. But if you go 2-7 and you outworked everybody, that's job security? And they go, yeah, I think it is. Isn't that crazy?
I love this. So again, I help coaches get jobs a lot and they'll come for advice. And I'm basically like, listen, there's 2 things you got to do in this process. Number 1, you have to be extremely open and honest with who you are from day one. Because if you lie or you just paint a picture of who you are just to get the job and then you're not that person, it is not going to work out for you. However, there are a few things you might want to keep on the DL when you're going into this. Like you don't say, and I've learned this the hard way because 10 years ago, I said, no more staff meeting. We're not coming in on the weekends. Kids aren't coming in. Coaches aren't coming in. We got technology. We can do this. So we're not coming in. And I haven't come in like 10 years of coaching and won a state title, had successful, career, whatever. And then we gave the players off. Now we've modified it too. And I've studied your stuff as well. 10 years ago, I was like, man, this is too much. I need to give my kid. So we gave them off on Monday. So we would watch film. We wouldn't run. We wouldn't do anything. I said, I'm going to give you 3 days to rest your body or whatever. And then we've modified our schedule throughout those 10 years of taking Wednesdays off, taking Thursdays off. But I learned real quickly to stop telling admin. I mean, if you have to, if job security is really on, then there's some admin that are like, I'm watching film. I'm doing X, Y, Z. I've got, we're working. Broncos still getting head coaching jobs. Some people are like, well, he hasn't been successful in terms of blah, 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 blah. That's also because he always picks challenges. Some people don't just find fulfillment in life by going after the best programs and just taking them from a top 10 to a national champion. Some people find fulfillment in starting from not very good and making them good. And so that's where he finds his fulfillment. And then he will literally tell you point blank, I am going to be fly fishing on Thursday afternoons. We're leaving the office at 12. I'm going to be out fly fishing. I'm going to be riding my horses every evening. All right. And if that don't hire me. That's courage. You got to have the courage to turn down jobs that if you feel like they're going to call you out on.
This is weird advice, but recently I've been pointing at Dan Campbell, of all people, as a great example of how you should be as a coach. Now, the Dan Campbell that everybody sees is the bite off the kneecaps, growling and swearing. And
I'm laughing because I wrote a thread on him today and I went through this really good. Keep going.
I wouldn't be surprised if we match a little bit. Now, Dan Campbell went after Mike Clark for his S&C guy. Mike Clark is a track football consortium speaker. He is in the family tree of Feed the Cats and all that stuff. So he went after a speed guy. You could say like a woke type of guy. And who does Mike Clark bring in to do their sprint protocols? But Chris Corfus, my business partner. And, they have 1080 sprints. And when I see David Montgomery that Chris Corfus trained while David was with the Bears, who Chris took him from 20.9 miles an hour to 22.1. I see him run. Sometimes damn, was that Gibbs? Because Detroit is really fast. And I think that Dan Campbell really appreciates health and speed and a lot of woke things. But yet you can still be like a public persona of this crazy football coach. That may be great job security.
Yeah, I love it. Like I use Dan Campbell on a thread because I know he's got that, again, I'll use your words, don't get at me guys, the Neanderthal kind of persona on the outside where it's like, look at me, grit, toughness. Because I know he's going to draw eyeballs from a lot of coaches. But then if you really get down and study him and look at him, man, it's so much deeper and there's so much more relational aspects of it. But this was how it was with Bronco. He had unbelievable expectations. Like you walked on pins and needles around him, not because of fear, because of respect. And you loved it. The Pygmalion effect or research, basically like higher expectations on people, though you'll have better results out of them. And I mean, he brings in a challenge. Like nothing you or I, that you say that I say doesn't say like, hey, we want to expect less of you. We
No,
expect more of you in
more.
less time. So it's even harder. And so, yeah, I love that you brought him up because I think he's a weird, not weird, but, a mix. He's got one persona. It's kind of like Kobe Bryant and the Mamba type deal, man. You got one persona when you're on stage, on the court, in front of a team. And then you got another persona when you're in the locker room and when you're walking around your players and loving them up and all those things.
I have a feeling like this will not be the last time we speak. You will be asked back on a podcast. You will be asked to speak at Track Football Consortium, all that stuff. I've just absolutely loved this last hour, and it went so fast. Let's talk about how people, like you sent me the PDF of the Bronco Mendenhall stuff, and I loved how efficient you were in your writing and describing things. I read articles on Simply Faster sometimes. I can't get through the third paragraph. It's just, oh my God, this guy wrote forever and he doesn't get to the point. But you got right to the point after point after point after point. Now, is that PDF free?
Yes. So that, if you go on my Twitter, my X, at Thad Wells, I've got a lot of content right now. I've got chills right now, to be honest, because you hit the nail on. Nobody said that yet over the last. So about 2 months ago, 6 months ago, I got out of coaching just to focus on coaches more than anything else, coaches and leaders. And the thing you notice when you go down this path is efficiency, right? And so that carries over into all aspects. And so again, I don't read as many books as I want to read because I've got so many other projects and I want to put versus consumption, I'm trying to create more and share more. But at the same time, if you're trying to help busy people, which one of the reasons coaches don't read because I don't have time to consume an entire book. So if I'm going to help, I've got to write concisely. And that the book I was showing you earlier today about writing, it's like getting to the point, saying what you have to say. That's a little bit about my marketing background as well as loving to read. And so so again, 2 months ago, I said, okay, if I'm going to really take this serious, I need to go all in where the coaches are, where leaders are. And that's on X. And so I went all in on just sharing content. And then I tried different formats and I wrote a story on Bob Ladouceur. It took off a thread. It took off. And then I was like, okay, is this random? Did it again. It took off again. And over the last month, I've had 10 million views on these threads. I shared my story. It has over 2 million views on my story. And they're averaging like 200,000 views a thread. And I was like, what is this? Like, why is this working? Like, because I've shared these thoughts so many times. Now, like, one is I don't have a big name, like in the grand scheme of sports. And so you're leveraging the thoughts and names of other people's journeys and stories. But ultimately what this is a human nature that we love stories, Star Wars, Joseph Campbell's hero journey, all that stuff. And I've studied that for a long time. Like I went deep into Joseph Campbell and storytelling and all those things. And I've just never really thought about doing it for coaches. And it just naturally happened. And then I'm like, this is kind of like teaching in parables in a way of real coaches' journeys. I get so many messages now, DMs from coaches from high school to NFL to whatever, business leaders. They're like, Thad, man, thank you so much for sharing that story because, I feel like I'm at a point of giving up. And you just shared a story where but what that is, I'm sharing a story. It might be 20 posts long on a thread, but it's still only a couple hundred words. So you can read it in a few minutes. And then, so yeah, if you go to my X at Thad Wells, I've got these threads that are just really hot right now. And then it leads into like, hey, if you want this guide on a book, you don't have to read the 500-page book. I created a 5-page guide that like distills this down. Here, take this, take the principles. I still value the reading. So if you can find the time, do that. But if you can't, at least do something. And that's just kind of what I'm putting out there.
Yeah, I say that Twitter changed my life. And, it's hard to convince people to see X for kind of what it is. There's lots of Nazi porn, on X. I mean, it's like gross and stupid and all that kind of stuff. But Twitter gave me free reach, which is that's two really important words if you're in the business of sharing ideas, that you don't have to pay for your reach, that your messages will sell itself or not sell itself. Twitter, and I think you will agree 100% as well, made me a much better writer. Because when you are limited by the number of characters you can use, you have to do just what we're teaching coaches to do. You have to reduce, and you will not reduce the main things, eliminate, you will edit the stuff that didn't matter to your message. And so it forces you to prioritize, become an essentialist. And if you have more than one idea, you have a thread of 10 things like you do, but every single thing is easy to read and gets right to the point, which I wish a lot of writers that I read books of would write more like tweets? You know what I mean?
I mean, today I just put out the Dan Campbell tweet, and I don't know how many words it is exactly, but it's 20 posts and it's probably under 300 words, 200 words. I don't know, not a lot. And that took me like 3 hours to get it down, but it took me like 2 hours, not 2 hours. It took me like an hour for just the first post, because if I don't get the first post right, the hook, it doesn't matter anything else. And I'm sitting here, you got 280 characters and I'm reworking it, rewriting it like, oh, nope, that doesn't work. That doesn't work. And then if the thread doesn't go, it's more than likely because either the first post, it didn't bring them in, or the image or video I put with it didn't bring them in. And so in success in life comes down to having a strategy, executing that strategy, and then studying the results and iterating based off of that. Success is staying in the game as long as you can and course correcting when you fail. That's literally it. That's getting back up. It's Ray Dalio's cycle and loop of failure. You're just trying to get back up and swing again, man. Throw another punch. And the Twitter game, the coaching and business and making money online, it's all testing. It's all iteration. And what I love about putting your thoughts into the real world, it lets you know if you're actually adding value. Because if you're just in a cocoon thinking certain things and then sharing them without getting feedback, you have no idea if people care. X lets you know if they care about what you have to say or not.
Immediate feedback.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, I've spent the last 20 years coaching the game of football, and I'd loved every minute. I'm really looking forward to exactly what you just said. I want to spend more time thinking about all the things I've learned over the last 20 years. I want to write. I want to read again. I want to help people with thoughts, and not just thoughts. I want to help people implement thoughts that change their life and, tackle life.
And not just football coaches.
No.
This for teachers and dads and insurance men, right?
Yeah. So like I was saying earlier, I sought knowledge away from the game and brought it into the game. And so I'm more than happy to help coaches seek knowledge outside the game and bring it into their game, as well as help business leaders, spouses, parents, any type of leader take something from football and bring it into their world. It's just such a beautiful trade. Instead of being our little ecosystem, this little network of whatever, if you can take the time to bring another idea in. And I love that you said the word seeker, because the identity I've chosen, instead of just accepting coach with all that brings with it, which is good and bad, I've chosen the identity of truth tackler. That is the identity. And when people come into the tackle life world, I say, hey, man, if you want to be here, you got to be a truth tackler. That means you're going to go seek the truth and you're going to go live the truth. Because if you just find knowledge and it's just up here, what good is that? You're wasting your life. You've got to put stuff up here and then apply it to help others in some kind of way. So truth tackler is the identity. And the fact that you said seeker, you hit the nail on the head. That's it. I appreciate you so much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you again for listening to the Sprint-based football series on the Coach and Coordinator podcast. Be sure to check out our presenting sponsor, Titan GPS. It's used by Sprint-based football coaches to get better data and understand the player load and how they can adjust that over the course of the season. It'll help you find out a lot about your team. It's used by Garrett Muller, who's a two-time state champion at Stewartville High School in Minnesota. He uses it for all kinds of things, like seeing how his team's speed is progressing over the course of the season. I could say that in 2024, they actually got faster over the course of the season following their sprint-based football recipe. Titan Sensors also has the popular truck stick metric, designed specifically for football and inspired by sprint-based football. Follow all we're doing at coachandcoordinator.com. You can get our show notes there. We have articles on these episodes as well. And follow us on X at Coach K. Grabowski.